Today in my devotions, I read two different passages in the Old Testament, and there's such a contrast in the way the people thought about their relationship with God, and they're wanting to hear from Him and to hear Him speak. The first was in 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 10. And the Lord called as before, Samuel, Samuel. Samuel responded, Speak, for your servant is listening. Notice he responded to God very positively. He wanted God to speak to him because he says, I'm listening to you. But then look at the response of the people in Exodus chapter 20, verse 19. You speak to us, talking to Moses, and we will listen. They said to Moses, but don't let God speak to us or we will die. You see, there's a completely different response, a completely different attitude about the relationship with God and who God is and what's going to happen, how God operates, how God thinks. We see that Samuel, he had a very close relationship with God, obviously. He wanted to hear from God. He didn't expect to die if God spoke to him. He expected to obey. He expected to, hear something from God that maybe wasn't going to be easy, but he knew it was going to be best. But the people, when they were talking to Moses, they only wanted to hear from the man. They didn't want to hear from God himself. They expected to die. They thought that maybe they thought they were unworthy or whatever. Maybe they were worried about what God was going to say to them. Because maybe they thought, well, if Moses tells us something, if we don't really have to listen, but if God speaks, then what happens? Are we obligated to obey? What's your attitude about hearing from God directly? Yes, God can speak through other people. We don't want to discount that. He does it a lot. God can speak through nature. He can speak through anything. But the point is, don't you want to hear from God directly? Wouldn't it be better to hear it directly from His mouth, directly from Him, than just listening to what somebody else says? We have to develop that kind of close relationship with God, cultivate that intimacy with God to such a point that we want to hear from Him, and we are eager not only to hear from Him, but to respond in obedience to what He has to say for us. That should be how we look at